There is a different kind of chill that runs through the room when you hear that someone connected to Sean Diddy Combs is coming after Faith Evans and the fortune tied to Biggie's children. This isn't regular gossip. This isn't industry mess. This is a violation of legacy, family, and sacred memory. Biggie's estate represents one of the few things that was built out of pure talent, pure struggle, pure truth, untouched by the chaos that swallowed so many artists in the 90s. And now news is circulating that Diddy's circle, his protectors, his loyalists, or the people tied to his legal battles, are allegedly trying to claw their way into something they never helped build. That alone is enough to make anybody stop and question how far this entire empire is willing to go to keep itself alive. Biggie died in a cloud of confusion that the industry never resolved. Justice was never delivered. Closure never came. His mother buried her son. Faith raised a child without his father, and generations of fans watched one of the greatest voices in hip-hop history disappear into a mystery that still hangs over Los Angeles like smog. And the one person who benefited the most from Biggie's success was Sean Combs. The publishing, the ownership, the power, it all stayed in Bad Boy's possession long after Biggie's body hit the ground. So the idea that anyone connected to that empire would now be pushing themselves into Biggie's children's financial future feels predatory. It feels intentional. It feels like a final act of disrespect to a man who isn't here to defend himself. Faith Evans has always been the quiet storm in this narrative. While the world obsessed over the triangle between Biggie, Faith, and Lil' Kim, Faith was carrying the real weight: widowhood, motherhood, and the pressure of protecting a legacy she didn't ask to shoulder alone. She raised CJ. She navigated all the legal mess tied to Biggie's music. She kept the estate stable when the industry would have eaten it alive. And now, after decades of handling her business with grace and restraint, she's facing legal heat from a camp tied to a man already drowning in federal investigations, lawsuits, survivor testimonies, and documentary exposure. This is where the story gets darker. Diddy's downfall has triggered a ripple effect, and every unresolved debt, every buried secret, every handshake deal is starting to surface. People once afraid to speak are suddenly talking. People once loyal are now flipping. And people who used to depend on Diddy's financial ecosystem are scrambling to secure whatever money they can before the empire collapses completely. When a powerful man falls, everybody connected to him starts grabbing whatever they can reach on the way down. And Biggie's estate, clean, profitable, well-managed, and rooted in the legacy of someone universally loved, becomes a tempting target for people who don't care about morality, family, or respect. The disturbing part is how predictable this moment is. Diddy's name was attached to Biggie until the day Biggie died, and for years fans questioned how much control Bad Boy truly had over Biggie's music. So to hear that people tied to Diddy are allegedly trying to sue Faith Evans or claim a stake in her son's inheritance hits a nerve that goes deeper than celebrity drama. It feels like a ghost from 1997 has walked back into the room. It feels like the energy surrounding that era of violence, greed, and betrayal has resurfaced to take one last bite out of the legacy of a man who already gave everything. This isn't just about a lawsuit. It's about power. It's about who controls the narrative of Biggie's life. It's about who feels entitled to his art. And it's about who profits from a death that remains suspicious to this day. And we're just getting started. The moment this lawsuit story hit the internet, the entire tone around Bad Boy's legacy changed. Because this wasn't just another accusation, another survivor coming forward, another executive spilling industry secrets, or another documentary shining a light on what happened behind closed doors. This time the target was Faith Evans, the widow of one of the greatest rappers who ever lived. And the fight was over the fortune tied to Biggie's children, not Diddy, not labels, not managers, not executives. And that's why this situation feels heavier than the rest. This is the piece nobody thought they would ever touch, because Biggie's estate has always been sacred territory. It was the last piece of him the world respected. But apparently, for some people, even that isn't off limits. The shocking part isn't the lawsuit itself, it's who filed it. Not a random creditor, not a distant relative, not a forgotten collaborator. The person suing Faith is Wayne Barrow, the exact same man fans have been side-eyeing for years due to his proximity to Diddy, his involvement in Biggie's affairs, and his strange pattern of publicly defending Bad Boy every time new accusations come out. The man who keeps insisting Diddy paid for Biggie's funeral despite never producing a single receipt. The man who pops up every time a scandal breaks, acting like the guardian of Diddy's public image. And now suddenly this man, who had no biological or marital link to Biggie, is claiming Faith Evans is withholding money from Biggie's estate and that he, not Biggie's widow, not Biggie's kids, should be the one controlling Biggie's LLC as the manager. That's not just suspicious, it's insulting. To understand the gravity, you have to rewind. When Biggie died in 1997, his entire estate, the publishing, the likeness rights, the name, the future royalties, had to be managed by someone. Biggie's mother, Voletta Wallace, took that role. And from everything the public knew, she protected her son's legacy fiercely. She ran the Christopher Wallace Foundation. She worked with Faith. She stayed close to CJ and Tiana. She didn't play when it came to her son. But after she passed away earlier this year, something strange happened. Instead of the control passing naturally into the hands of Biggie's children or his widow, it passed to Wayne Barrow, a man with no blood connection, but a heavy bad boy connection. And the lawsuit claims Voletta signed documents on her deathbed, while in hospice care, to sell half of Biggie's estate to a company called Primary Wave. That company now owns a large chunk of Biggie's catalog, his image, and the licensing rights. And once she died, Wayne Barrow stepped in as executor and immediately turned on Faith Evans. This is where the story becomes disturbing, because according to the lawsuit, Faith Evans gave the proceeds from the catalog sale directly to the only people who should legally receive anything from Biggie's legacy, his children, and herself. She split the money between CJ, Tiana, and her portion as the legal widow. That's clean, that's lawful, and that's exactly how inheritance works. So why is Wayne Barrow upset? Because he is insisting that the trust, the one he controls, is owed a portion. And he's claiming Faith is keeping him in the dark, refusing to share financial information, refusing to let him inside the LLC, and refusing to split the money with him. He's painting her as uncooperative, disrespectful, unprofessional, but something about that doesn't add up. Why would Biggie's mother, a woman who adored her grandchildren, sign a contract while in hospice care that ensured her grandchildren would lose control over their father's legacy to a man they aren't related to? Why would she sell off half the catalog shortly before dying? Why would she hand full authority to someone connected to the exact machine that made millions off Biggie while Biggie was alive and kept making millions after he died? And why did the alleged contract only go into effect after she passed away? The timeline alone feels like a red flag held up by the ancestors. This is where Gene Deal's commentary becomes relevant, because he has repeatedly claimed the managers Diddy placed around Biggie during his life and after his death were not random hires. They were part of a structure designed to control the money, the narrative, and the legacy. And it's those same individuals, or individuals tied to that same network, who seem to be resurfacing now. Not to protect Biggie's children, not to honor him, but to squeeze whatever financial value remains. The lawsuit implies Faith is withholding money, but withholding from who? Not from the kids. They got their share, not from herself. She got her legal widow's share, not from Biggie's family. They don't exist anymore. His parents passed. She is withholding from the trust, controlled by Wayne Barrow, a trust that did not raise Biggie, did not bury Biggie, and did not carry the trauma that Biggie's family carried. And now that the catalog has been sold, suddenly the trust wants to donate its portion to the Christopher Wallace Foundation, a foundation which also seems to be controlled by individuals outside the immediate family. Why are outsiders controlling everything Biggie built? Why are the people Diddy allegedly put in place now pushing legal action against Biggie's widow? Why is Biggie's estate being carved up like the man didn't have two children who should be the exclusive heirs? And why does every road lead back to the same group of executives who orbit bad boy-like planets around a black hole? There's a pattern here. A pattern of artists dying under suspicious circumstances, managers taking control of their estates, catalogs being sold when the family is vulnerable, money flowing everywhere except into the hands of the people who deserve it. The moment this lawsuit was filed, it exposed something deeper. It exposed the infrastructure behind Bad Boy, an infrastructure that outlived the artists while consuming their legacies. And now, even with Diddy in the middle of federal investigations, civil lawsuits, accusations, and a cultural reckoning that grows bigger every day, the machinery is still moving, still clawing, still searching for profit in the shadows. Faith Evans spent decades protecting Biggie's name. Wayne Barrow spent decades protecting Bad Boy's name. That's the difference. That's the heart of the conflict. And now the courts may decide who controls what remains of Biggie's empire, an empire that should have always ended up in the hands of his children, not gatekeepers, not executives, not vultures circling the estate of a man who died at 24. This is bigger than a lawsuit. It's about legacy and about exploitation. This is about who truly benefits when legends die young. And it's about how many hands are still reaching for Biggie's pockets almost 30 years after his death. The deeper this situation goes, the more it becomes clear that the fight isn't just about catalog percentages or profits from a sale. This is about control. Control over Biggie's name, his likeness, his legacy, and the money that should have gone directly to the only three people the law recognizes as his rightful heirs: his widow, Faith Evans, and his children, CJ and Tiana. Everything outside of that circle is noise, confusion, and manufactured authority coming from the same pockets of influence that surrounded Biggie when he was alive and somehow still refuse to release their grip almost 3 decades later. And when you follow the paper trail, it becomes almost insulting how obvious the conflict of interest is. The Christopher Wallace Memorial Foundation is presented to the public as this heartfelt nonprofit dedicated to empowering inner-city youth, helping them access books instead of weapons, giving them a chance Biggie never had. It sounds noble. It sounds beautiful. It sounds like something a loving mother would create to honor her son. But the moment you peel back the top layer, the entire image collapses. Because somehow, the co-chair of that foundation, the same foundation supposedly built to serve black youth, just happens to be Wayne Barrow, the exact same man filing a lawsuit demanding that 50% of Biggie's children's inheritance be rerouted into that foundation. And not just rerouted under his control. That is not charity. That is not memorial work. That is not community uplift. That is monetized access disguised as philanthropy. How convenient that the very man who positioned himself as the gatekeeper of Biggie's legacy is the one arguing that millions of dollars should flow back into an organization where he holds a leadership title, a public image, and likely a level of financial influence. Meanwhile, nobody can point to a single moment in Brooklyn where any youth program, library, scholarship, or book initiative funded by Think Big Books Instead of Guns showed up with a $50 million footprint. No schools were transformed, no centers were built, no educational campaigns rolled out with that kind of money behind them. The numbers don't match the narrative, and that's where the insult hits the hardest. Because if this foundation has existed for years, if the mission is so important, if the funding is so critical, where is the evidence of impact? Where is the community transformation? Where is the legacy building? Where is the change? You don't see it because it's not there. What you do see is a lawsuit demanding that 50% of Biggie's catalog profits, somewhere between $50 million and $75 million, be pulled away from his own kids and funneled into an organization chaired by a man who is not in Biggie's home, not at Biggie's table, not in Biggie's bloodline, and not entitled to anything except whatever role Voletta Wallace gave him while still alive. And once she passed, he turned that role into a power grab. Faith Evans is being painted as uncooperative, evasive, and problematic. But the truth is simple. She didn't withhold anything from the heirs. She simply refused to hand the children's inheritance over to people who had no right to it. She refused to let vultures disguise themselves as guardians. She refused to let another layer of the bad boy machine sink its claws into a family that already endured enough trauma from that era. And that refusal triggered this lawsuit. This isn't about business. This isn't about fiduciary duty. This isn't about bookkeeping. This is about a certain group of industry men tied to the same empire, the same network, the same unfinished stories, trying to get one last payday off the name of a man who has already been exploited beyond comprehension. It's the same blueprint we've seen before. Put a manager in place, gain control through paperwork, insert yourself into the financial structure, wait for the family to be vulnerable, then strike under the guise of upholding the legacy. They did it when Biggie was alive. They did it after he died. And now they're trying to do it again. And the hypocrisy is what makes this story sting. Because for decades, these same individuals showed up on TV, in documentaries, on radio interviews, acting like they were the guardians of Biggie's integrity. But now that millions are involved, they're acting like Faith Evans and Biggie's children owe them something. As if managing his mother's affairs gives them equal standing with his bloodline. As if the deathbed signing of a contract is justification for stripping the family of the estate they built their lives around. The truth is simple. If the mission of the Christopher Wallace Memorial Foundation was truly rooted in community uplift, the children would have been the first ones protected by it, not undermined by it. The foundation would have honored the grandchildren before elevating an executive. The work would be visible, the empowerment would be loud, the transformation would be undeniable. Instead, all we see is paperwork and claims, not progress. And this is why the court battle matters. This is why people are watching. This is why the timing is suspicious. Because everything happening around Diddy right now, the investigations, the lawsuits, the exposure, the testimonies, the reckoning era, exposes not just his individual behavior, but the entire power structure that was built around him. The more that structure cracks, the more people scramble to secure control over anything of value. And Biggie's estate is extremely valuable. Faith Evans stood her ground. That's why the lawsuit was filed. That's why everything is coming to light. That's why the story is unraveling. People can pretend this is about compliance. People can pretend this is about procedure. People can pretend this is about the Foundation's mission. But at the end of the day, the truth is sitting in plain sight. They wanted Biggie's kids' money. They wanted control of the catalog proceeds. They wanted access to a $50 to $75 million sale. They wanted to redirect it into an organization they control, not the family. And now that the paperwork is exposed and the lawsuit is public, the mask has slipped. So from this point on, every time somebody runs out, defending Diddy, defending his network, defending Bad Boy's structure, the question must be asked loud and clear. What is your connection? What role did you play? Who put you in place? And what are you gaining from this? Because at this point, nothing is off the table. And nothing should be taken at face value anymore.